100 Love Sonnets by Pablo Neruda. I don't love you as if you were a rose of salt, topaz, or arrow of carnations that propagate fire. I love you as one loves certain obscure things, secretly, between the shadow and the soul. I love you as the plant that doesn't bloom but carries the light of those flowers hidden within itself. And thanks to your love, the tight aroma that arose from the earth lives dimly in my body. I love you without knowing how or when or from where. I love you directly without problems or pride. I love you like this because I don't know any other way to accept in this form in which I am not, nor are you, so close that your hand upon my chest is mine, so close that your eyes close with my dreams.
And welcome everyone to Magic Words. I'm out in the Poconos near the sun, so I'm going to keep moving about a little bit. That was Roxanna Arrojo with Pablo Neruda's poem. We have with us today Laura Riley. Yay!
Hello.
Laura's coming in from LA. We have Elaine Meder-Wilgus, who's coming in from State College and Webster's Bookstore. Tierra Williams is with us. And Tierra, are you in State College right now?
Yes, State College.
Yeah. And I clicked the wrong one. And Daralyn Jay is coming into us from New York City. So welcome everybody. And thanks to everybody out there. We're here today to talk about magical words and how words influence us, how words inspire us, motivate us, and why reading is important and how we fell into reading. So I'm going to ask everybody up there to talk a little bit about your first endeavors in reading as a child. What did you love? What stories did you love? What authors did you love? And how did that continue as you grew up or as you got older, if we didn't necessarily grow up, right? Anybody out there want to take it? Elaine.
Yeah, I've been an avid reader all of my life. It started because I came from a family of readers. Some of my favorite early childhood books are Island of the Blue Dolphin by Scott Odell. I was so touched by the main character's resilience, by her ability to care for her little brother, and just the way she responded to challenges with just perseverance. I was really struck by that. And, you know, when I read a book when I was younger, I would turn it into play. I would act it out with my friends. So that the connection between theater and literature has always been really strong with me. So obviously I love books.
Yeah, I think if you're going to own and run a bookstore for how many years? How long has Webster's been around now?
Gosh, 28 years in some incarnation.
I know. Yeah. Yay. Independent bookstores, important for us to have. Somebody else.
I'll go. Velveteen Rabbit made an impact. Then Little House on the Prairie, the series, all of them. And then Little Women, Little Men, and Joe's Voice. And that's it. I was hooked. I mean, just to be able to go back and relate to these female characters and their struggles. Because I was in first generation in the United States. And even though they weren't, they were struggling and they were poor. Yeah.
You know, I'll go next because, like Roxy, I absolutely fell in love with this series as well. The Laura Ingalls Wilder, the Little House on the Prairie series, Nancy Drew series, and all the Louise Fennell Alcott books. But even before that, as a young reader, there was a series by Beverly Cleary called Ramona. And Ramona was very mischievous, and she was always getting in trouble, and I loved her. And the other heroine like that I love, and yes, I still own books, is Eloise, Kate Thompson.
Ah, yes.
Eloise lives in the Plaza Hotel in New York, and she runs the place. So if you haven't gone to Jersey, it's there. But those heroines and those attributes have stayed with me all my life, and I'm the storyteller now. After singer, I'm a dancer, these are always to tell the story.
Mm-hmm.
I can go.
Yay!
I also came from a family of readers, so much so that when we go on vacation, we're all sitting around the beach reading and not talking to each other. Which is the downside, I guess, but we then get to trade books, so it all works out. But when I was little, my mom would read us lots of stories, bedtime stories, all through the day. And we had lots of favorites. I love the fairy tales with the princesses and everything like that. I was a huge princess person. And a special book to me is Anne of Green Gables, because it's a series of 8 books. And my mom and grandmother started reading it to me as my bedtime story at night. And by the end of the books, 8 of them, I was reading to myself. And so it's kind of like the How I Learned to Read book for me. And it's just so flowery, and like the words are romantic, and Anne's in love with words and in love with reading, and it helped really connect me. And you all named all my other favorite series with, Nancy Drew and Little Women and all of that. Little House on the Prairie, I read that stuff too, and Heidi. And I also like the Babysitter's Club and R.L. Stein and all those fun things. It was just candy.
So I started differently. I liked reading, but it wasn't until my parents got me this book and put my name in it that I was like, oh, reading is so fun, right? So they dedicated a Yogi Bear book to me, and I was all through the stuff. So I was like, okay, reading is fun. And then one of the first book fairs I went to, I got this book called Raising Sweetness by Diane Stanley, and she actually signed the book. So I actually thought it was cool that I could actually meet authors in real life. And then I grew up in Mississippi, so Ronald Dahl, for some reason, was a big thing for me. I don't really know why I was so into him, as well as Edgar Allan Poe and John Grisham. I know these are weird titles, but these were the things that I was somewhat into. But then I also learned with this book, The Skin I'm In, that I could see myself in books. And this is when I actually looked into poetry and started The Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, and The Raisins and the Suns, and those type of things. So those were that's what got me into that. But this book, I was like, oh, she looks like me. And so I really got inspired to do more reading. But when I found out about poetry, I started just reading a lot of poetry books and kind of left the other ones alone. But all in all, I just really like how people use words and transform things. And so I'm really excited to be here. So thanks.
Yeah, I mean, part of what growing up for me, we couldn't afford books, right? But my mother took us to the library every week. And what we did was pick out whatever books we wanted and bring them home. And she was an avid reader. And you guys talked about a lot of the things that we were reading. And The Velveteen Rabbit is obviously one of my favorite childhood. Roxy and I have talked about this, right? I mean, that quote of once you are real, you can't be ugly, except for people who don't understand, right? I mean, and that's a message we want young readers to have too, right? And Tierra, you just said it in terms of finding people that look like them and us, right? And we find more of that, I believe, in poetry than we find in printed books anymore, which is why today, for the rest of this broadcast, we're going to share multicultural poets. And Roxy, I'm just going to let you kick us off and we'll all talk and go from there. Thanks, everyone.
So, my next poem is That Thing by Alberto Rios. And the reason that this poem resonates, it's about being quiet, silence. I tend to like it, being a bit of an introvert. And so this resonated. That thing. No word rhymes with silence or tries to. No word wants to visit that furtive backyard garden. Silence is the word that will not be spoken. After all, who could pronounce it? Once spoken, we will not hear it. It is the story not told, the memory carefully unspoken in this house, your house. Silence is a place underneath language, and unto itself an army stronger than words, more patient, bigger than the dictionary. Its weapons are familiar, painful without antidote, and giving of no respite. Quiet tells us it is coming, and so too, quiet is tolerated, left to be, undisturbed at its work. Silence's grim reaper, allowed only to make deliveries, to fill the bins, to cut the grass, eat if it needs to, then expected to leave quickly, cleanly. No trace afterward, no errant grass cuttings, no black on the bottom of its shoes on the floor. Goodbye, we say, as in saying, mispronounce its name, but happy not to know, ready not to ask. Goodbye, we say, and mean it.
Hi, I'm going to do Truth by Gwendolyn Brooks. And if the sun comes, how shall we greet him? Shall we not dread him? Shall we not fear him? After so lengthy a session in the shade. Though we have wept for him, though we've prayed all through the night years, what if we take one shimmering morning to hear the fierce hammering of his firm knuckles hard on the door? Shall we not shudder? Shall we not flee into the shelter, the dear thick shelter of the familiar propitious haze? Sweet is it to sleep in the coolness of snug unawareness. The dark hangs heavily over the eyes.
This poem is entitled A Black Woman Speaks by B. Richards. A black woman speaks of white womanhood. What gives her the right? Slavery, lynching have to do with white women. Would like to speak of it as it will and should be. What is that? When white womanhood stands for full equality, but it is not there yet. Why? Still a superiority thing and needs to separate from their own validation. This is taught to them by white supremacists. White womanhood, slavery too, only to a different degree. You were willing slaves, both sold in different ways, and you did not fight. She is fighting for unity, just as she has fought for freedom. We are women together. White supremacy poisoned. White skin is supreme. And yet, you didn't protest. As even in your pink slavery somehow thought my wasted blood confirmed your superiority. Both bore him sons in different yet similar ways. What happened to sons she bore? Sold. Your reaction? You felt avenged, taking his infidelity out on you as if you were the enemy. You hated slavery, but abhorred equality. But together, we can be free and achieve justice, peace, and human equality with plenty for all.
Hi, I'll be reading The Words Under the Words by Naomi Shihab Nyai. For Siti Kadra, north of Jerusalem. My grandmother's hands recognized grapes, the damp shine of a goat's new skin. When I was sick, they followed me. I woke from the long fever to find them, covering my head like cool prayers. My grandmother's days are made of bread, a round pat-pat and the slow baking. She waits by the oven, watching a strange car circle the streets. Maybe it holds her son, lost to America. More often, tourists who kneel and weep at mysterious shrines. She knows how often mail arrives, how rarely there is a letter. When one comes, she announces it, a miracle, listening to it read again and again in the dim evening light. My grandmother's voice says nothing can surprise her. Take her the shotgun wound and the crippled baby. She knows the spaces we travel through, the messages we cannot send. Our voices are short and we get lost on the journey. Farewell to the husband's coat, the one she has loved and nourished, who fly from her like seeds into a deep sky. They will plant themselves. We will all die. My grandmother's eyes say Allah is everywhere, even in death. When she talks of the orchard and the new olive press, when she tells the story of Yoha and his foolish wisdoms, he is her first thought. What she really thinks of is his name. Otherwise, it is just a world with a lot of rough edges, difficult to get through, and our pockets full of stones.
Daralyn, I can't hear you. Can we check your mic? It looks like your mic is off.
Oh, you know what? I think it was unmuted.
There we go.
It's better. Okay, great. Let's try it again. The Girls in the Circle by Nikki Giovanni. The girls in the circle have painted their toes. They've twisted their braids with big yellow bows. They took Grandma's face powder and powdered each nose, and sprayed evening in Paris all over their clothes. They are amazed at how they look. They smell good, too. Mother may not be amused. The girls in the circle now tease and giggle. They look so grown up with their high-heeled wiggle. Their pearls are flapping, their dresses flow. They are so sorry they have no place to go. Mother refused to drive them anywhere looking like that.
Missing More Than a Word by Tanea Winder. Someone once asked me, what are the words I do not have yet? Verbs that will story our bodies into something more than missing, more than squaw or lost beyond statistics. 1 in 3 Native women will be raped in her lifetime. Daily ritual. My hands search and sift through layers of tiny earthquakes. Shifted verdicts, not guilty, not enough evidence, not prosecutable, not our jurisdiction. I dig. Native women are 2.5 times more likely to be sexually assaulted compared to all other races. I dig. We are vanishing lines in history books, treaties. Laws do not protect us. I dig until mud and earth find home underneath my fingernails. I'll plant something new in the absence. Burn, vanish, underreport. Invisible, our ghosts starve while the rest of the world keeps on eating. A recent government study found that there were 14 federal human trafficking investigations in Indian country between 2013 and 2016. During that same period, the FBI investigated 6,100 elsewhere. Let us poem a place where you cannot erase us into white space. Let us dig to remind ourselves our roots are ancestral, and there is nothing deeper than these sacred, dirt-covered hands.
Hello. Next, I'm going to read Empress Dowager Boogies by Tina Cheng. Last night, I found my face below the water in my cupped hands, the mask made of copper and bone, crisscrossing to make a smirk, a false glamour, a plated glaze. I unwound myself from the heavy machinery of my body's burden, the lute, the light chime. I'll get up and partner myself with music, the purple moon peeling itself like a plum. Men stand in a circle, and they will ask and ask again. I want to pick the thick bud, to lose myself in the body's posture, bending in or away, to let my majesty and my birthright go, and gesture toward a waking life. Thank you.
Feminism by Carolyn Rogers. Our mothers, when asked, may speak of us in terms of our accomplishments. My daughter is a flower shedding buds of brown babies. She holds 2 diplomas in her fist as she knows her obliqueness to a world that only cares for credentials. What is your claim to fame? What is your claim to life? When there are no diplomas to be lauded, no husbands to be pillared upon, no buds to be babied. When does the wind blow on your face? And in what direction do you turn when it rains?
A Small Story About the Sky by Alberto Rios. The fire was so fierce, so red, so gray, so yellow, that along with the land, it burned part of the sky, which stayed black in that corner for years, as if it were night there, even in the daytime. A piece of the sky burnt, and which then could not be counted on, even by the birds. It was a regular fire, terrible. We forget this about fire. Terrible and full of pride. It intended to be big, no regular fire, like so many of us. It intended to be more, and this time was. It was not better or worse than any other fire growing up, but this time it was a fire at just the right time and in just the right place. If you think like a fire, a place it could do something big. Its flames reached out with 10,000 pincers, as if the fire were made of beetles and scorpions clawing themselves to get up, pinching the air itself and climbing. So many sharp animals on each other's backs, then into the air itself, 10,000 snaps and pinches, at least, so that if the sky was made of something, it could not get away this time. Finally, the fire caught the sky, which acted like a slow rabbit which had made a miscalculation. It didn't believe this could happen, and so it ran left, right into the thin toothpicks of flames, too fast to pull back. The sky, with all its arms, hands, fingers, fingernails, all of it, disappeared. Goodbye. The sky stayed black for several years after. I wanted to tell you this small story about the sky. It's a good one, and explains why the sky comes so slowly in the morning, still unsure of what's here. But the story is not mine. It was written by fire. That same small fire that wanted to come home with something of its own to tell. And it did. A small piece of blue in its mouth.
Life Doesn't Frighten Me, a poem by Maya Angelou, paintings by Jean-Michel Basquiat. Shadows on the wall, noises down the hall. Life doesn't frighten me at all. Bad dogs barking loud, big ghost in a cow. Life doesn't frighten me at all. Mean old Mother Goose, lions on the loose. They don't frighten me at all. Dragons breathing flame on my counterpane. That doesn't frighten me at all. I go boo, make them shoo. I make fun, way they run. I won't cry, so they fly. I just smile. They go wild. Life doesn't frighten me at all. Tough guys fight all alone at night. Life doesn't frighten me at all. Panthers in the park, strangers in the dark. No, they don't frighten me at all. That new classroom where boys all pull my hair, kissy little girls with their hair in curls, they don't frighten me at all. Don't show me frogs and snakes and listen for my scream. If I'm afraid at all, it's only in my dreams. I've got a magic charm that I keep up my sleeve. I can walk the ocean floor and never have to breathe. Life doesn't frighten me at all. Not at all. Not at all.
21 Love Poems, Poem 2 by Adrienne Rich. I wake up in your bed. I know I have been dreaming. Much earlier, the alarm broke us from each other. You've been at your desk for hours. I know what I dreamed. Our friend the poet comes into my room where I've been writing for days. Drafts, carbons, poems are scattered everywhere. And I want to show her one poem, which is the poem of my life. But I hesitate and wake. You've kissed my hair to wake me. I dreamed you were a poem. I say a poem I wanted to show someone. And I laugh and fall dreaming again of the desire to show you to everyone I love, to move openly together in the pull of gravity, which is not simple, which carries the feathered grass a long way down the upbreathing air. And I'm going to bring back in everyone out there. Yay. We lost Roxy, who was coming into us from Middletown, New York, and we knew that was a possibility. So there is a great article out there on the National Poetry Foundation called, what did I put it? Poetry is an egg with a horse inside, which is something that a young child wrote about what poetry was to them, right? Finding and discovering these little things. So we talked about books. Let's take our last few minutes and talk about poetry and the voices that speak to us. Who wants to go?
I guess. Oh,
No, you can start, huh?
The one I've had the most experience with, because I got into plays and everything like that, is Shakespeare. And at first I was really scared of the sonnets and the poetry part of it. And then I took a class that went into it more, and I just fell in love with it. It's just really rich, and you get to go in and you get to understand it more, and you don't have to be afraid. It's enjoyable.
I can go. So I first really got into Langston Hughes and Maya Angelou. Those were the two that I was just into, and then I found out about Nikki Giovanni. I found out about who am I trying to say? Sorry, my brain is going blank. So I always say her name wrong. Ntozake Shange. I always say her name wrong. Okay, forgive me. But when I realized that you could do that, like a chorea poem, when I realized, oh, you can actually do that, it really inspired me to understand more about poetry, because I didn't know, I thought that was, I remember all the rules of poetry, and I don't remember anywhere that you could make it into a dance or something, right? So I didn't understand it, but I really loved how she did that, and I think it's just really interesting, and now I see more people doing, I guess what I call motion poetry, right? Whether it's dancing or painting and all of these other things. I just think it's really cool how people have been able to mash it together.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was going to mention that over the pandemic in particular, I had a customer reach out to me and say, I feel like so many people around me are taking solace in books and I'm just having trouble focusing. So I directed her to poetry, and she said she had never read any. So we talked it through various emails. We talked about some poets to start with, sort of the gateway poets, and we ended up having really deep conversations about the beauty of poetry to soothe oneself, as well as being able to challenge you, but also be comforting, because it is so open-ended in its interpretation. So I always think about that with poetry, that for so many people, if they've not been exposed to it, it can really open up worlds to them.
I agree so much with that, Elaine, and also the fact that because poetry is short form, they're able to get into it much quicker, and it's not as intimidating. I was first exposed to poetry by my mother. I come from a family of educators, and she's a teacher to her core. So she would recite Paul Laurence Dunbar's poetry to us, which is something that as a child she had to learn. I don't know if kids still have that happen in school, but you would actually learn poetry and you would recite them. And so she recited Paul Laurence Dunbar from memory, and I then learned it. Later on, went on to read it, and that just opened up a whole world to me. Maya Angelou was a huge, huge influence, as well as later on going into high school and college when I discovered Ntozake Shange. And what was also wonderful was having the opportunity to meet some of these people who wrote these incredible words, like Ntozake Shange, like Sonia Sanchez, and talk to them about how they created these little worlds.
And I think for me, I teach a lot of poetry. I do poetry workshops and run as many poetry events as I possibly can. And I'll often get asked, why poetry? And I'm like, why not? Why, poetry is life for me. It is, all these wonderful, wonderful worlds, and that we get to explore and hear other people's ideas, other people's experiences, right? And like Daralyn said, most poets you get a chance to meet, right? Which is very different than the celebrity type world, right? So why do we need to do this? Think about how we learn. We start with poetry and song and rhyme and rhythm. And then at some point we teach it away. So, my goal is that we stop that exercise and we just keep it going for the rest of our lives. I want to thank all of you for joining us here today and sharing words. And, hopefully I will at some point get each of you in your own solo show and we can do a much longer piece of some of your own work, as well as sharing some of the others. And I'm going to just end with a Little Prince quote, right? The Little Prince, right? Which is another book that was really big for me growing up. And it is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye. And I think that's what poetry brings. So thank you, all of you out there that are going to join us on Facebook and on YouTube, and for everybody on screen with me. And we will see you next time. Thanks.
Bye.